in this final video, what I'd just like to do is remind you that all of the activities, especially the work for the Padlets, the progress audit, the change strategy, and your Canvas, need to be uploaded by Sunday the 12th at midnight. And I'm going to give you a bit of freedom, a bit of leeway with the Toast activity and with the parking activity. There, what's really important is to try and learn the technique and to try and learn these techniques for creative thinking and for creative problem finding, which is a very useful skill, of course, in your research. Finding good problems means that you're going to find something which will be useful for you to solve. Finding other people's problems already solved is pretty easy, but finding original problems to solve is finding new perspectives on your field of study, on your domain, if you like, and that's really going to make a massive difference. I'd just like to kind of finish up with 10 conclusions of things that I think you should try to avoid in the workplace in general, but in research groups specifically, and in your research. These are not part of any official list or any official list of competencies or workplace skills. They're really just reflections of mine after far too many years in and around and out of and observing people at work and in the workplace. Things to avoid, well, both on a personal level and on a group level, is something that we call the Peter Principle, the principle of Lawrence Peter, who says that people tend to rise to their level of maximum incompetence in the workplace. Now, what is the reason for this? Why are there so many incompetents above us, we may be thinking? Very often people in universities, in workplaces in general, are promoted for the wrong reasons. Being a great footballer does not necessarily mean that you're going to be a great coach. The same as being a great teacher does not mean that you're going to be a great head of teachers. Being a great student doesn't always make you a great generator of knowledge. It should help, but it shouldn't. So we must always have this idea of the Peter Principle in mind, that choose very carefully what we're doing. It also means that we should love the activity in itself. Many years ago, I opened a small hotel in the country, as you do, and I was surrounded by lots of other people who were opening small hotels at the same time. Now, a lot of them were actually much better at decorating old houses than they were at being hotel owners. Running a hotel is cooking, is cleaning, is waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning to let people in when they've lost their keys. These are the actual activities of running a hotel. The decorating it is only a part of it. And the same with the PhD research. You should really love the actual activity, and you must learn to love the writing as well, because that is the work that we need to do. So we need to develop those skills. Not delegating, people who don't delegate enough, the pace setting type leaders who always want to micromanage, if you like, not just their activity but others. So learn to delegate and try and work in teams where people are delegating. A lack of clarity. Now, this is something we also mention in the things to do. We live in an age of kind of abuse, if you like, of a very technical, bullshitty type of language which sounds good but very often isn't actually saying anything. Learn to communicate, articulate clearly in simple, plain language what we're doing, when we need to do it, and what it will look like when we've completed it. That's clarity, getting to the point. Learn to create quiet time for people working in your group. Many years ago, I worked in a project with a company where we noticed that everybody was communicating all the time. And communication is fine. Communication, they say, is 76% of work today. The communication is the work. Well, that's fine, but we also need quiet time in order to actually get things done. What do I recommend? Well, in work groups, in research groups, in any group team effort where people are working together in a similar shared space or in similar shared projects, or they have access to mobile telephones, is to prohibit communication between certain hours of the day unless it's something disastrous or tragic, like the building is on fire, somebody's died from poisoned coffee from the coffee machine or something. But between 9 o'clock and 12 o'clock, say, quiet, peaceful time where people can just get on with their work, and communication, unless it's urgent, is prohibited or extremely frowned upon. So quiet time is important. It's when you actually do things. I work basically from this den of chaos behind me, and I actually get a lot of work done because I don't have that many distractions, and also because I practice digital disconnection. I switch my telephone off. Not learning from mistakes is another major thing to avoid. Discuss, debate what goes wrong. That's where the learning is. Don't resist change. Be open constantly to change. Researchers are all about change. There's no research unless we're trying to change perspectives on something. Always avoid immediate thinking. The simple, fast solution is generally not going to be the most creative solution or the most interesting solution. Look for the difficult questions and the difficult responses to those questions. As I said before, switch off your phone and don't practice tunnel vision. Now, how can we avoid tunnel vision? We can avoid tunnel vision by stepping outside, if you like, of our domain, of our field of research, literature, art, theatre, music, cinema. All of these other areas of human activity will actually help us to find solutions that we're looking for in our work. The brain never stops, but we do need things to challenge ourselves sometimes, and we also need it to disconnect and allow it to toggle, if you like, on and off switch in order to do good creative work. 10 things you should do in the workplace, and these are really thinking about people who are going to end up leading teams or form part of teams. Now, we looked a little more closely at team management and the Cogler-Hill model of team management, but these are things that I would, some conclusion that I would always try to remember. Always try to talk at least once a week, even if it's just 5 minutes, and in the corridor, at least once a week with all of the members of your team. Even if it's 5 minutes and you're talking about social lives or the psychopolitics of your faculty or department. People can drift off our radar very often, but if we are in a position of responsibility, we will defuse and avoid problems in the future, making sure that we have a decent, common human conversation with people at least once a week. And here I'm actually looking for a book. Well, I'm going to put it... No, here it is. Fatma asked for some books. This is a wonderful little book. It's actually very short, by the historian Theodor Zeldin, where he talks about the art of conversation and conversation over history. Some years ago I was working with the UNED University, the Open University here, the Distance University, the UNED Senior courses, and we had students there who were up to the age of 92, 93, studying courses. 89 I had one lady, 92 another wonderful student, and when I asked them what they would like, what kind of course they would enjoy, they said to me, well, we would just like to come and have conversations. We don't have conversations anymore, which was actually a tragic thing I found. And I think, well, maybe that's possibly another of the pandemics that we have in the 21st century, this lack of decent, open, dialogic conversation. So make sure you talk to people in your group at least once a week. Second thing I recommend that you do, recognize, always recognize, but recognize in the right way. Praise should always be public, and criticism should always be private. Never criticize people in public. Everything we do as leaders, as bosses, as chief researchers is amplified, it's at a louder volume than anyone else. So always criticize in private and praise in public. And when we criticize, make sure it's constructive, make sure we make it a learning activity. Audit your time, and this goes on to another one, which is to keep a blog, keep a diary of your work. Make sure that you are taking notes and making notes of what you're doing and keeping a record of what you're doing. Research blogs are very useful, not just for ourselves, but for the community. Make work doable, make it specific, make our objectives and our tasks clear and understandable, and I would say quantifiable. I always like to bring things down to a quantifiable level. I ask my students, what do you mean by that? What does that look like? How long will that take? How big will it be? Make it specific, make the work doable. When you fix yourselves some pages to write, specify what you would aim to achieve before you aim to achieve it. Now, writing objectives down doesn't mean that they're going to happen, and probably doesn't make them any more likely to happen unless we do everything else. Going back to the ideas on motivation from Module 2, there's no motivation without the hygiene factors, without the basic relationships being on a healthy level with the people that we work with, without people worrying about whether they've got enough money to live on at the end of the month, without them feeling safe and secure in their positions. No quantity of drinks on a Friday night or Researcher of the Month prizes are actually going to motivate if we don't have the hygiene factors in place. Unfortunately, that doesn't depend upon you. That's something that the Spanish university system really needs to understand. Make the work meaningful. Work should be meaningful. Don't just delegate all of the menial or boring tasks, allow people to participate in the meaningful work. Avoid these kind of very strict hierarchies that are very negative for creative work. Celebrate successes, but also learn from failures. If we talk about the success freely, we should also talk about the failures. One community of practice activity that I used to carry out with companies when I worked in consultancy was to ask people to tell me about 3 success stories that they'd had as a department, and then also immediately after to talk about 3 failures, 3 moments when we had failed as an organization, and what we could learn from those. The failures are much more interesting, as we saw with customer journey maps in design thinking. Failure is where we find the opportunity. There's no opportunity for us as researchers if there aren't any failures. We need to embrace them, which does not mean that you cannot fail dramatically and drastically yourselves. Of course you can. Learn to step outside. Some of you in your audits have expressed some really quite complex human situations. Poetic distance. I'm a humanities, a literature graduate in my time, so they're one of the questions that we ask ourselves very often is, how does this poet survive? Well, obviously lots of them don't. They jump off cliffs or drink themselves to death, but the ones who survive do it because they are capable of separating themselves from the work. And this ability to step outside, similar to the step on the balcony idea of the adaptive leadership model, but really it's learning to distance ourselves in order to observe and in order to maintain our mental health in this very demanding, very lonely task of writing your research thesis. I've been talking for long enough now. I'll be uploading I'm just very quickly counting to check that I've got 10 things we should do. Yes, 10. It's a decalogue. That's good. I'll be uploading a reading list for you tomorrow morning to carry on with some of these ideas. Don't forget, you've got until Sunday the 12th, and if you push it, I'm not actually going to disconnect the Moodle at 12 o'clock on Sunday. You can probably even up till Monday morning upload your tasks. Try to make sure that you do the 3 big Padlet tasks, because that's what I'll be using in order to send feedback onto the G9, and that's it. Okay. Connect by LinkedIn, by whichever social media platform of your choice. It's always very good to maintain the contact and to see the good results that come out of your work in the future. Okay, it's been a pleasure.